You can start whenever you're ready.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to give everybody another minute to click on. Sometimes some machines take a little longer than others. Looks like we're going to have another mild day, which is always good. And no tornado here. Those pictures were so devastating. I couldn't believe it. What was in 4.5 minutes it all happened? Something like that.
My daughter lives in another part of Kentucky. And in that period of time before knowing where in Kentucky the tornadoes hit, there was, fright because you didn't know if it was where she is in Lexington, and it turned out to be in the western part of the state. Not good for anybody, but you just worry about your own family.
It's terrible. I grew up in tornado country. I know what that's like.
We've had our fair share this year.
Right. Okay, I guess we're ready to start. Good morning. I'm Elaine Chapnick, and I want to welcome you to the December meeting of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Local Summit. Though it's been almost a year since the first shots of the COVID vaccine were available, variants of the virus are nevertheless able to infect even the vaccinated, as we know here with our own county executive, George Latimer, who has recently tested positive, as we all know. In spite of this, though, we're grateful that he's still able to address us this morning via Zoom. So I'm going to turn the program over to Nina Cuddy, today's chair, who will introduce him and continue the program. Nina?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to all our attendees. Special thank you to George. I hope you're feeling well enough to get through all this easily. And thanks for making the big effort. And thank you to LMC Media, who's always incredibly supportive of us and does a great job, and we appreciate it. Before we started this program, when we were in preparation for the program, we sent to George a series of questions, 5 broad topics and a bunch of particular questions after that. So I will tell you what our broad topics are, and I'm going to leave it mostly to George to answer the specifics that we sent to him, and we'll just kind of try to keep track of any issues that we had raised that were not answered by the time he finishes his first remarks. The topics broadly were county finances, flooding, subject near and dear to the hearts of those in the Sound Shore, affordable housing, right to counsel in eviction proceedings, and environmental concerns. So we're going to ask him to start to address each of these and with his remarks. I also want to point out that at the end of, we're going to leave about 12 to 15 minutes at the end of the program for questions and answers. There's 2 ways for people to participate. You can send a question in on chat at any time during the program, but we will not be answering it at that time. We would just hold on to that till the end of the program. Or you can wait till the end of the program and raise your hands, and then the questions will be asked in the order in which they were received. So if you're afraid you won't remember your question, use chat, but otherwise hang on till the end. And with that, again, thank you to George, and I'll turn the program over to George, and let's hear what he has to say.
Well, thanks very much, Nina and Elaine. It's a pleasure to be back at the summit. I think I've been at summit meetings since the summit began over 20 years ago. And I even remember that it was 30 years ago this December that I was county legislator-elect, and just beginning the process of representing Larchmont, Mamaroneck, and of course Rye, where I live, in the county legislature. 30 years is a long time, but over those years, most everybody that I sort of scan in the list of attendees of people that I've dealt with in some capacity or another, I have had the good fortune to be a county legislator, an assemblyman, a senator, and now county executive. And with each of those jobs, my turf and responsibilities grew. This job is an executive job. We've completed a 4-year term on it. And it also covers the whole of Westchester County. So things that, were common understanding here in the Sound Shore, which I grew up in government thinking of, I have to broaden to try to deal with the way things are in northern Westchester, the way things are in the river towns and so forth. And it's been a growth experience for me. So I just want to first start by thanking all of the people who are here and the people that you represent, because for 30 years, Larchmont and Mamaroneck has been very good to me. And I'm very appreciative of it, most recently being reelected to my second and my final term as county executive. As you may recall, I authored a bill which the Board of Legislators passed to limit county executives to 2 terms. And some people don't love the idea of term limits. I think term limits on an executive position is warranted because an executive has a lot of unitary power. And, if you have a good person in the job, great. If you've got a bad person in the job, you may be stuck with them because what gets you elected could be a combination of insider ability to raise money and name recognition, not necessarily a popular appreciation. So long story short, second and final term begins January 1st. So in essence, for me personally, this is halftime in the show. This is when we first complete a first term, the budget that the Board of Legislators passed yesterday, what I'm going to talk about. And I am going to start with COVID, now that I am one of the 152,000 people in Westchester County that at some point in time has tested positive for COVID. So I know I'm not the only one. Right now, my symptoms started on Saturday night. They're mild. They were mild then. They're mild today. Little sore throat, little cough, light cough, which you'll hear during the course of this. And I think that's probably why I didn't think I had COVID until I learned that there was an outbreak at an event that I was at. Others have tested positive. Given HIPAA laws, it's not for me to tell you who else was positive. All I can tell you is that I'm very glad that when they just started to do contact tracing, most of the people that I was in touch with were not potentially infected by me, because you have to have 15 minutes in close quarters, because I would be the typhoid Mary of Westchester County. I would be, I'm everywhere. I have 10 events a day in every corner of the county. Everybody knows that. And I'm the wrong guy to get a communicable disease. So I'm going to stay put right here, and we'll zoom our way through the next 10 days. I want to compliment when we talk about COVID, the fact that we've had such good health care professionals who've given us tremendous service in our Department of Health, led by Dr. Charlita Amler. The nurses and the doctors of that department have helped Westchester really do as good a job as we could, given the fact that we had the first significant outbreak in New Rochelle back in March of 2020. COVID was everywhere, but it wasn't being tested. And that was the first concentrated amount of testing in New Rochelle in that particular cohort. And what we've seen subsequently is a roller coaster ride of up and down that generally has tracked the seasons of the year. And since vaccinations came in a year ago, that roller coaster is less high in its peak problems and a little bit lower when it gets to the depth of problems. But we're watching the weather, which affects our behavior, affect the COVID realities. In the summer, spring, summer, fall, we're out more, we have more outdoor activities, less COVID spread. When we go indoors for winter, when we get together during the holiday season, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year's, all of that puts us in closer quarters with each other, year-end parties and so forth, and we find ourselves more susceptible to the disease. But it's important to understand that where we are right now is in a period of the highest infection, and so the efforts that we make are not designed to be a permanent lifestyle change. We're trying to deal with an epidemic that's in front of us right now with a serious level of infection. Let me give you some statistics so you can judge it by. November 13th, 1 month ago, as of, yesterday. 1 month ago yesterday, we had 1,289 active cases of COVID. That's people who tested positive over the prior 2 weeks, guys like me right now, that haven't gone through the 2 week, the 10-day period of time to fight the system, fight the disease in your system. 1,289, we had 27 people hospitalized countywide. We had an infection rate of 1.8%, meaning 1.8% of all the people that tested were positive for COVID. 1 month later, December 13th, yesterday, 1,259 is now 4,868 active cases. The 27 people hospitalized are now over 125 people hospitalized, and the 1.8% infection rate is now 4.8% infection. So there's clearly been a big jump in all indicators over the last month. And we expect over the next month to see a continued rise. We still have activity around the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday. And those two things, along with the cold weather, is going to keep us, we think, on an uphill situation. So what do we have to fight that? We obviously have vaccinations. The medical community has its double vaxxed and now triple vaxxed with a booster shot. I admit I held off doing my booster shot, and that was it was not the right decision. Don't be a dummy. Get your booster shot. And even when you're double vaxxed, which I was back in March and April, the antibody protection descends as the year goes along. And I think we all understand that now. We may be in a future where we have to get an annual COVID shot. That could very well be the story. But nonetheless, the vaccinations is a major situation. Westchester County is over 93% vaccinated, not counting boosters. I don't have statistics yet to show what percentage is boosted. It's clearly a much smaller percentage than that. But we are ahead of Rockland, Putnam, Orange, Dutchess, the Bronx, and so forth. And I hate to make this correlation because I do not want to be partisan, but there's a clear connection between the philosophy that you have and whether or not you get vaccinated or you don't, whether you wear masks or you don't. And the people with a certain philosophy don't want a mask, don't want to be vaccinated. People with a different philosophy accept vaccination, accept mask wearing, and there's a difference in results between those two realities. The increase that we have right now in COVID, if we increase over the next month, why mask, why vaccinate? To reduce the amount of increase over the next month. That 4.8% infection becomes 7%, 10% infection. And there's examples of that in upstate New York, in the Buffalo area, along the southern tier, Finger Lakes, and in the Adirondacks. And many of those places have hospitals that are at the breaking point of capacity. We don't have that problem at this point here. I don't think we're going to hit it. And I don't think we're going to need the most severe measures, which is the shutdown of the economy or the reduction of how many people go to where they have to go to do business. That were emergency efforts that were done when the inspection first started. And also there's been a change in philosophy. Former Governor Cuomo had a very centralized philosophy in Albany. Governor Hochul has a decentralized philosophy in which she's looking at county executives and mayors to be able to take initiative on their own. Last week, I signed a state of emergency executive order, 30 days, which allows certain powers that I do not normally have, but I haven't used any of them yet. So I'm very judicious about using authority to mandate things. I only want to do things that I know we can enforce that will actually help the situation. And I know people all the time tell me, well, look at what Mayor de Blasio is doing in New York City. They have a different set of dynamics. And, Ed Day in Rockland's got a different set of dynamics. And, on one side of me, somebody says you're doing too much. On the other side of me, they say you're not doing enough. So hopefully we're finding that the right medium to protect ourselves, but at the same time, not shut down the economy in a way that has other negative effects, because there are other negative effects when you have that. And we're facing that with the eviction situation coming up and a host of other situations. So just to wrap up the COVID situation, from our standpoint, we expect the numbers to climb for the next month, and we think they'll level off and start to come down. And if everybody can get a booster shot, that's what we're promoting. We're promoting pediatric vaccinations so that the younger folks that weren't able to be vaccinated for can be vaccinated. And to the extent that we can do that, I was at Webster School in New Rochelle, Mamaroneck Avenue Elementary in Mamaroneck, and Rye Neck Middle School. So we're trying to get those things down. The county is trying to be a partner to help the schools with the pediatric vaccinations. And I'm confident, just like I'm going to get through this in the next 10, 12 days, we're all going to get through this in the next number of days. Next, let me talk about the county budget. County budget, this is my completing my fourth year as county executive. And I had the ability to put together budgets for 2019, 2020, 2021, and now 2022. And I must tell you, the role that the Board of Legislators plays is a substantive role. It is a role that matters in the process. And the end product, which I intend to sign today, is a joint product between our executive branch, which prepares the budget and presents it, and the Board of Legislators analysis and scrutiny. I want to compliment Catherine Parker, who I think is in the same boat that I am in right now with COVID, but she individually and her colleagues collectively have done a very good job working with the administration. Now, you don't hear this very much. You hear about how tough it is to get something through both houses of Congress, how tough it is to get things through Albany. A little easier now, but still difficult. We have a good working relationship in Westchester County between the legislature and the executive branch, and it's bipartisan. The vote yesterday was a unanimous vote for the county budget. That budget cuts taxes, $7 million of property tax cut levy. I'll tell you what that means in a second. We were able to put additional money in our reserve fund. We're almost up to reserve funds, about $300 million. A reserve fund is your savings account. After I took over and there was some things we had to clean up, our reserve fund was down to $64 million. That is a very small number compared to a $2.2 billion budget. A $300 million reserve is a very responsible reserve. And I have to tell you, that's why we've had an upgrade in our bonds. There was a big decrease in bond rating when I took over. The bond rating agencies did the summary at the end of 2017, my predecessor, and they downgraded our bonds. They took us from AAA down to AA plus, and they put us on a negative watch. And we have moved off of that now to a stable position. And I think if we can put a couple more years like this together, the bond rating will be up. When you have a good bond rating, it's just like your personal credit rating. If you've got a good credit score and you borrow for less interest rates. And when we have to borrow, we want to do that. And we did that not only because of the money we put in the reserve fund, but in this budget that we just passed, there's no one-shot financing. In other words, we didn't sell something, make 10 million off of it and use it to pay for something. So the budget is balanced for this year, but next year there's a $10 million hole. There's no one-shots like that in this budget. There is also no borrowing to pay for ongoing expenses like pension costs or certiorari reimbursements. That's the reimbursements to major companies that get tax relief because they were overassessed. And it is legal to borrow to pay for those two expenses. They show up in your operating budget. But if you don't borrow, if you pay as you go, Wall Street looks at that and said, that's very responsible. Now, I have to tell you, it's not because I am a great guy. We have very talented people in this government. And when I came in 4 years ago, I did not fire everybody that I inherited. So I kept a lot of people who served as commissioners under my predecessor. And I did make many moves too. I hired different people. But what I did do is I made it not political. And I said to these commissioners, however you've been managed before, you're going to be managed different now. Talk to the Board of Legislators, talk to the press, go out to the summit and speak as Norma Drummond has and Blanca Lopez as an executive has. Go out there and communicate with people. You're not under the political thumb of the ninth floor, which is where our executive chamber is. And all of a sudden you get out of these people the best of their thinking, the best of their ability. And now we're coming up with different ways to find non-property tax revenue, renegotiate contracts that saves us money, all of these different things that are helpful to us in the way we've gone about doing our business in this budget. This budget includes $10 million in additional funding for childcare. We all know that childcare for working families and for everyday families is a critical cost. I've heard childcare can equal or surpass what a mortgage payment is in a family that has children to be cared for. We put in $5.5 million, and the Board of Legislators worked the budget, raised it to $10 million. We put money in this budget to create something that was very high up on our police reform task force recommendations, a mental health crisis team, 8 of them around the county. It's contracted out, where in a certain situation, if the caller calls in and says a person is out there and they're acting in a certain way that's dangerous, but it appears they're having a mental episode, we send out with the police mental health professionals. So the mental health professionals may be able to de-escalate the situation, because sometimes those situations wind up in a tragedy when the only response is, the traditional SWAT type of response. So we put $6 million in the budget to do that. All of this fits within our overall budget. And we put in $50 million for affordable housing. I know one of the questions you had is about affordable housing. Let me state that when we came into office, affordable housing was not a priority of my predecessor. They did what they had to do to satisfy a lawsuit, which meant they had to get 750 units of affordable housing. They did that, to their credit. But we have taken on the responsibility that affordable housing is a necessary function that the county should be involved in. We don't have a housing agency where we actually develop the housing. We use different resources to incentivize affordable housing. And that is what we've been in the process of doing. We did a report that came out 2 years ago that showed we need 11,000 units of new affordable housing to meet the demand. I'm sure that demand rises every day. So far, we're working on about 2,500 units of affordable housing. We've opened up 34 units in Port Chester this summer, 75 units in Greenburgh, 100 plus units in Yonkers, all over the place. And we're working on many more projects. We had one in downtown New Rochelle, fairly small, but the problem we have is multiple. One problem is money, but we put $50 million of capital in this budget, $25 million for land acquisition, $25 million for infrastructure improvements. Land acquisition, piece of land is available. You're competing with the private market. Affordable housing developer can't buy the land, build it on. We help contribute to the cost of buying the land. Infrastructure, the land is workable, but you have to extend a sewer pipe. You have to curb cut, put up a traffic light. You have to do certain things that make the project more expensive. The county can come in with money to help advance that. And you can get so many units here and so many units there. And $50 million is far and away the greatest financial commitment this county has ever made to affordable housing. I know it sounds like a superlative, and go back to the records and check. No government, administration, and legislative branch have committed this much money to affordable housing. Now, it's still difficult because you got to find the right site. And you also have opposition in certain communities. And there is some pattern of those communities that really don't want affordable housing compared to those that will accept affordable housing. We try to use sweet reasonability as much as we can. excuse me, that sort of style of operating. But we will use legislative enforcement if we have to, but we're going to do that as the court of last resort and try to get as much units online as we can. We have a third tool in affordable housing, and that is our Industrial Development Agency, our IDA. We incentivize various projects, and we negotiate a certain number of affordable housing units in those projects as another way to add to the inventory. Generally, the developers don't want to add affordable housing. They'd rather have full market rate. Some communities press us to approve the project as is because it's in their community, and they want it as is, and that's a problem for us to work through. But we do try to get as many units as we can, and people get hung up on percentages. I just want to see units. I want to see a total number of units that get us up to that 11,000 mark. I don't think in my 4 years ahead I will hit the 11,000, but I think I've got a very good chance of coming close to it and lay the groundwork down for what will be the next administration after mine making progress in that regard. That's what happens when you're Zooming from home. In any event, but we're committed to affordable housing, and we're also appreciative of those governments. Mamaroneck Town is one of them that did some changes to the zoning law that makes affordable housing more appropriate. I thank the town board, Nancy Seligson and the town board, for adopting that, and that too is part of what was in that lawsuit from a couple of years ago. But this budget, just to summarize, has a lot of things in it that are very good, and I have to, obviously, note that the federal government has given Westchester County and other places significant federal funding over the last 2 years. You asked a question about the county finances and how much of it is ARPA driven or from last year, Coronavirus CARES Act money driven. And I would say to you, the bulk of the money that we get from the federal government is used directly for expenses that we track back to the COVID outbreak. I'll give you an example from last year's, the prior year's budget. We spent $10 million to assist small businesses during the heart of the COVID crisis with a grant program. That's a small business benefit. It covered X hundred businesses around the county. That money was directly from coronavirus federal money. We used $5 million to help obtain food for the various shelters and for the various food pantries. And we went through Feeding Westchester. We did some support for the local pantries because, as I'm sure our friends at Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force will tell you, the demand for food has shot up during the pandemic. Much greater demand, much larger number of people that are food insecure. So we used money for that purpose. We also used money to handle overtime. We were running tremendous overtime in our health department, as well as in our police and corrections department. And police and corrections, because if you get a police officer who has COVID, and he may have infected 2 or 3 of his friends, they're all out of service for 10 days. You don't go to a temporary agency and say, hire me 10 police officers for the 2 weeks that they're out. You run overtime from the existing workforce. And overtime is time and a half, double time. You spend a hell of a lot of money on overtime in both of those 2 areas, police and corrections, where they are sworn officers. If we have it in a different part of county government, we can bring in temps. So with that, the money's been used for that. Now, what we've done in this budget is we've taken the money that we've received from ARPA and we've interfaced it in the budget with different categories. So the Board of Legislators added a $10 million allocation for small landlords to help the people who have small little situations, their tenants can't pay the rent, give them some direct relief. We're not talking about the big corporate landlords now. Guy owns a small building, 6-8 apartment units. He may live in one of them, and he's not getting the money to pay his taxes or pay for the oil. And that program is funded through our ARPA money. Now, but we didn't create an ARPA budget. We interfaced it. And there's a very important reason why, and you asked it in one of your questions. What happens when ARPA disappears? We're very mindful that after the 2023 budget, this is the 22 budget right now, after the 23 budget, we won't have, or we don't expect to have, another infusion of money. We can spend the money that we have now in 24 and 25. So we spread it out. So we don't give you a budget. Here's 93 million. How are we going to spend it all this year? We're going to embed it in programs, and we have a longer lifespan of those programs. But we were very clear with all of our vendors, including our not-for-profit vendors who do great work for us. Don't assume that we're automatically going to have the money in 3 years' time that we have today. And if you're saying something is a pilot program, then let's not sneak the nose of the camel under the tent, saying it's just the nose when it turns out to be the whole camel. We have to be realistic about what we will be able to afford in 2 or 3 years, because we want to be moderate. We don't have to cut taxes every year, but we certainly don't want to spike and go up in taxes. And so our intent is not to have a spike in taxes in the forward. I am not making a commitment to never raise taxes. I understand my predecessor made that commitment, and in quest of that commitment, he tried to sell off the airport, and he did what he did with Playland, and he closed out a lot of other things that, in my judgment, were bad public policy. I'm not going to make a public policy commitment based on what's good politically. We will try, as we have already 3 straight years, to cut taxes or level taxes if we can, but the facts on the ground may require us to do something that we can't foresee. So I'm not going to make an ironclad commitment like that. I think our work shows it for itself, and we're serious about tax control. And I understand, my political party is not the party that's always identified with tax control and moderate spending and thoughtful financing. All I can say is, over these years, we've raised our bond rating, we've put more money aside for the future, we've cut taxes, and we've funded needed programs. And that record is not about what party we're in. It's about whether or not we use good management skills to accomplish our tasks. So I am going to stop talking as we reach the bottom of the hour. And I know I missed a couple of the questions here that you had, Nina. So you're welcome to ask them directly, and I'll answer them directly, and then we'll open it up to the whole wide world.
Well, I think that one of the topics that we didn't actually have an opportunity to address is, what is your position with respect to the proposed legislation for right to counsel in eviction cases? And also, if you could speak a bit more about flooding in Mamaroneck, because that's a topic that is near and dear to a lot of people who live here and who suffered. And the other thing is, if you could talk a little bit, I mean, we always talk about affordable housing, but even when we talk about affordable housing, what about people who can't afford the affordable housing? And there's an awful lot of them too.
Right.
And I mean, if we take definitions of affordable housing, I mean, that's one strata, but there are other strata. So I guess I'd ask you to touch on those topics. And
We'll touch on all of those right now. Right to
just
counsel.
do me one more favor, though, before you
Yes.
do that. There was a question that came up and someone didn't understand what ARPA funds were. So if you could just clarify
American
that.
Rescue Plan Act. That's the acronym for what the Biden administration and the government passed at the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA.
Okay.
All right. So let's deal with right to counsel. It's fairly straightforward. I've always supported right to counsel. I instructed John Noner, our county attorney, to work with the advocates in drafting a bill. There's work going on now between the Board of Legislators, a couple of their key people, the advocates, and John and the law department. When a bill is created and finalized, it'll go before the legislature. I expect it'll ultimately pass, and I expect to sign it into law. The difficulty, why we don't do it with the snap of the fingers, there's only one other jurisdiction in the state that has it, and that's New York City. New York City has distinct housing courts, which do nothing but landlord-tenant thing. Our landlord-tenant issues come before every court, every municipal court in the county. That includes villages and towns and some small villages, part-time judges. And there's a number of things that have to be worked out to satisfy the way the Office of Court Administration would handle these things. But we put enough money in this budget this year to handle providing counsel for anybody who has eviction problems, regardless of their circumstance. So the money is there for right to counsel this year, and we can allocate it. So this year is not an issue while they're debating the bill. When the bill is in final form and it gets passed, then it creates a permanent commitment that'll have to be funded in future years. And as long as I'm county executive, I'm not concerned about our ability to fund it. What I will tell you is that what you really need is a state law. And for all of the people who are advocates who come to me and they say, George, are you for right? Yeah. I've been for right for counsel all year. I don't know how you got the idea I wasn't. But the bottom line is that you want this as a benefit on the statewide level because people move between counties. People go from one place to another, and their circumstances are different if the laws of an local area are different. And it's going to be very different to get, I know Dutchess County to take the same philosophy that we do when it comes to right to counsel. So I expect we'll pass the law. I don't know how soon, first couple of months in the new year. Keep in mind, this is a new legislative session that begins since the election. There's new leadership that's been just announced the other day. They get officially in office on January 1st, and they have new committee chairs, and they will start their process. But I think you'll see right to counsel pretty soon. So I think that answers that question. Further on affordable housing, there is a fundamental problem in affordable housing that the county can't solve. And that is the degree of affordability is only reached at the lower end of the percentage of average median income when the federal government gets involved with Section 8 assistance, period. We have the ability, the definition of affordable housing is 80% of AMI or down. Now, Westchester's AMI is pretty high. It's in 6 figures. And 80% of that with a couple working. Now, he's making $65,000 a year. She's making $40,000 a year. They've broken the 6-figure number. And yet they don't have enough money to buy an apartment that's $3,000 a month. But they are in a need of affordability, and they're at 80% in round numbers. I'm generalizing. But you get down to 50% of affordable housing, that's still reachable with the kind of subsidies that we can create. You get down to 30% of AMI, and that's not reachable unless you have Section 8 assistance. So the problem exists. I'm not, I'm prepared to do a lot at the county level, but I know what we can't do. And that gap in making it affordable for somebody at 30% or lower than that, unless there's a special project, a project that gets separate funding from the federal government, a 200 some odd unit project in a place like Mount Vernon where they can qualify for specialized grants from the feds. We need the federal government to help us with Section 8 housing certificates that would allow us to provide that. And then there's also the affordability question that doesn't fall on our radar screen, which is the affordability of somebody that wants to buy a home. They're not looking for an apartment. They might be able to afford an apartment or the rent on an apartment, but they want to own a home. And the price of homes in this county, because of the demand, market demand, is out of sight. Even when you're making a decent salary, you're making a 6-figure salary yourself, much less what your spouse is making. And then you look at, I hate to say an average house, look at a fairly average house, it's $1 million. Yeah, $750,000. Where do you get the down payment? And that level of affordability is also beyond what a county government can do. And I think it's probably beyond what a state government can do. But I think our state legislators have done some creative thinking about that. And when they come on, you can talk about the broader levels of what the state can do to help the county in affordability, because some elements of affordability just are beyond what we can address. But I think the money we put aside, $50 million, is no chump change. And that doesn't count the money from the IDA incentivization. Let me deal with, flooding. Flooding's a big issue. Look, I've been around. I saw the 2007 flood. It flooded the offices that I was assemblyman in over on Mamaroneck Avenue, just 2 blocks up from the Mamaroneck River. It's Howard, Lester, and then Mamaroneck Avenue, and my offices were right in there. I was there the day the water started falling. The devastation is phenomenal. But here's the bad news. The devastation was everywhere in this county. We saw up close and personal Mamaroneck, and we saw up close and personal Portchester on the Sound Shore. We may not have seen, I saw the devastation in Yonkers along Warburton Avenue, or the devastation that happened in Mount Kisco, or the devastation that happened in other parts of the county. And I know the question included a question about having stormwater districts, separate districts. I think just like we need a consolidated sewer district, we need a consolidated stormwater district. And I'm not sure if I want to construct that as one district, call it a sewage and stormwater district, because stormwater follows gravity, and that's what sewage does too. I have Mike Kaplowitz, my former colleague on the Board of Legislators, former chairman of the board, working on the consolidation of sewer districts. Now, anytime you consolidate something, there's a winner and a loser. Somebody's got more money, somebody's got less money. When you consolidate it, the person with less money says, hey, great, we're consolidating. The person with more money says, wait a minute, why am I sharing what I have with this guy? And that is a reality. Some districts are further along than others. But I do think the flooding issue, which has been in what we've dealt with recently in Mamaroneck, has been that they've had a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers project. It's been identified, priced out $80 million. The county put in our capital budget an allocation of $11 million, which will roll over till the year that it's actually used, which would handle, which would handle our 12.5% portion of the project. So if it requires municipal, county, state, and federal money, the county has bellied up to the bar. Tip your hat to Catherine Parker. By the way, there's other places that also wanted money for flooding, and we did the same with them and other communities. But we need a macro set of capital projects because it's different everywhere. In some places, you can have upstream retention ponds, but that doesn't solve all of the drainage problems, because if you're sitting in the middle of a river and you're looking upstream, you can hold back water from coming downstream. but water still drains in from the sides because the river is the lowest part of the topography. And we have to come up with strategies on that. And I would say in final comment on flooding, and this is the unfortunate reality, but just like with COVID, I have to be honest, there are floods when you get so much rain in such a short time that no system can be designed to handle it. We know that the Bronx River Parkway will flood with 4 inches of rain. We know that. When we know we're going to get 4 inches of rain, we close the Bronx River Parkway. We own the Bronx River Parkway. We're responsible for it. We close it. There is no way we can engineer the Bronx River Parkway to stay open with 4 inches of rain, much less 6 inches of rain. And there are parts of where we have built our houses, where we have our public facilities that cannot withstand 8 inches of rain or whatever we got on that day. And so we're going to have to be realistic about what we can fix and how we fix it. In some cases, people have raised up houses where they have the money. Poor people on Howard Avenue don't have that money. How do we handle that? That is a much broader issue than the county, but the county is at the table with the local governments discussing it, and we're prepared to pony up the money that we have.
I think the other topic that we had sent you questions on had to do with the county's carbon footprint.
Yes, environment issues, sure.
Yes, so if you would like to take a minute or two to address that, we'd appreciate it.
I am not shy in talking, as you can see. On the
We know that.
on the environment, we're trying to do as many things as we can do at our level of government that's practical. Probably the thing that we've made most progress on is conversion of our Beeline bus fleet from diesel to electric or hybrid electric. Right now, we have 6 fully electric buses. We've got about 170 some odd hybrid electric buses, and then the rest are still traditional diesel buses. And those buses we're phasing out, and we intend to replace them with hybrid electric and electric. The bad news is hybrid electric buses and electric buses are way more expensive than diesel buses, and we've needed some federal help to obtain them. The Board of Legislators and the administration put $10 million, $11 million in this budget to handle additional, no, it's more than that, $35 million for bus purchasing. And as we continue to make that conversion, we also have to convert our regular car fleet. We have 1,000 cars. People who work for the health department go into the office, park their car, get in the county car, go out and do their inspections, come back in. Those cars, 1,000 cars, have to be converted as well to electric. We're in the process of doing that. It takes money, again, and it also takes infrastructure, which means we have to continue the infrastructure building of electric vehicle charging stations. Right. We've done quite a few already, 20 some odd, where we have county land. The restriction that we have is we can only put it on land that we own. We can't legislate it for somebody else. So we own land by the North White Plains train station. We put in 10 chargers there. We put in chargers at Mohansick Park and Hudson Hills Golf Course. So if these guys are going for a round of golf, they can pull their car up, plug it in, charge it up while they're going. And we're going to do more of those in the years to come. We know we need an infrastructure so that people have a confidence that they can drive around, just like there's a gas station someplace, but there'll be an electrical vehicle charging station. And I see these little signs we have up, EV with an arrow, so that if you're driving around, you see the arrow, you know that there's an EV charging pod at some point in time. We've also made the commitment to get directly involved in the food scrap recycling effort. Right now, we're taking on the cost of transportation. We're not doing the transportation, we're taking on the cost of it. And by subsidizing it, we allow each community that wants to participate in it just a plug-in cost where they can pay a certain amount of money. They don't have to negotiate with one of the waste haulers with minimal leverage. If we could find a place to fully compost in Westchester County, we would. Very hard to find. There is a new site going in Cortland that could probably handle about 25% of the compost in Westchester. And we think a number of the northern Westchester communities have the space to be able to do their own composting. But, Larchmont doesn't have that kind of space. There's a lot of places that don't have that kind of space. And so we're trying to figure out what the best strategy is. But the bottom line is, in the renegotiation with Wheelabrator, which is the plant where we dispose of our garbage, we have done a carve out of 50,000 tons this year to provide for composting of food scraps. And that was a major negotiating thing. It allows us now to advance our food scrap program and get that out of the waste stream. We have a solar collection program that's underway on the rooftops of a number of public buildings, in carports in some of our parks. I think we're still looking for state approval to do that. You've seen them, I think, at Manhattanville College. They have a sort of a futuristic looking carport that you drive under, and it collects the sun and generates enough electricity to power, some of the things there. So it takes, we could take entities of county government off the grid, saves us some money, and also provides more power on the grid for other uses. So those types of things are very much a part of what we're doing. We're trying to show energy reduction demand in peak season, going off the grid on those hottest nights of the year, so that we don't have to pay premium prices, which Con Edison needs to do to get. We're not at the level of government we can impose broad-based legislation or policies on the environment. That belongs to state and federal government levels. But I think we're doing a decent job. And what we're trying to do, and I used the word before, we're trying to show partnership with the local government. I mean, the proof of the pudding is you can talk to Lorraine Walsh, you talk to Tom Murphy, you talk to Nancy Seligson and Jane Eny, is the county a partner to you? I hope they'd all say yes. That doesn't mean we don't have moments where we're not in sync, but it's still George and Lorraine. And we've been that now for a long time in different positions. So it happens that I'm county executive now. And if Lorraine calls me up and there's some issue relative to enforcement of outdoor dining, we talk like friends, as opposed to like one level of government talking to the other level of government. And so whether it's the environment or any of these other issues, Nina, Elaine, I think we're showing us an attitude in county government that's different. Now, look, I ran against my predecessor. I just was reelected. We had our differences out. I went to the summit when he was present, and he spoke about his philosophies. And there are people that believe in his philosophies. There's just more of them that believe in my philosophies. And that's why we've won these elections. And I think we're delivering not just what my philosophy wants to see, but I think we're surprising a lot of people across the ideological spectrum, because we're showing ourselves to be good fiscal managers, good environmentalists, and they're not mutually exclusive. That's the whole point here. It's not one or the other. You can get both if you work hard enough at it.
I think before we move on to opening the questions to people who can use the icon and raise their arms, their hands, their virtual hands for questions, there were some questions that came up while you were speaking. One was about commenting on and this is from an individual named John Allen, who asked you to comment on the looming redistricting of the county at the congressional and state legislative levels. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I've lived through redistricting in a number of ways. I was chairman of the board 20 years ago when I was responsible for the redistricting plan of the county board at that time. You may remember 10 years ago when Susie Oppenheimer decided not to run for the state Senate. I gave up a safe assembly seat, not exactly knowing what the new state Senate lines would be. And they really misshaped that district. I managed to win it in some competitive races. Shelley Mayers wound up winning it as well. But so I've lived the redistricting hassle. Two levels of redistricting. The one that you're not talking about is the one that I have responsibility in, but it's a sideshow responsibility. The Board of Legislators has a responsibility to redo their lines based on the new census. By the way, the census shows for the first time 1 million people. We had an accurate census this year. We put time and energy from the county and local governments into it. And that was a major success during the COVID year, that we got a good census and we showed that we had the population we really had. So the county board is going to do their redistricting lines and they'll be reshaping it. And that will ultimately come to me to sign. That is the easy one because they're not running this year. The state assembly, the state senate, and the congressional lines are running this year. And the problem that we have is that because we gained in population in Westchester and we gained in population downstate, we have now more downstate control of these legislative positions, which means our lines push north, right? More of New York State are represented by downstate, but it takes people north of the district lines they were in. And I have to tell you, having been a districted state senator, let's say, if you take the state senate district and you move it north, you could district me out of it. It could be Portchester, Rybrook, White Plains, Harrison, Bedford, North Castle. That was in my old Senate district, in Shelley's district, but you wouldn't have Rye in it and I wouldn't live in it. And so you've upset the representation model. And I think most of us want to see districts stay pretty close to what they were. So that makes it a very difficult process. My general comment is that Andre Stewart Cousins and Carl Hastie, the leaders of the two houses, are people I know. I respect them. I know they're struggling with this issue now. They've had some independent maps done. To be candid with you, I didn't love the independent maps. I don't think they respected the contiguous interests of different municipalities. If you just look at places as population, that's one thing. But if you know the nuance in the neighborhoods, you take Alexandria Ocasio's district and you move her up into Mamaroneck, but you take the district that Jamar Bowman is sitting in, he's also in the Bronx, and you move up into a different part of Westchester. I don't know why you do that. Doesn't make sense to me. But I don't have a say on those things. And I think Andrea and Carl, who have not yet chimed in, will have a lot to say about them as we go forward. But we're going to have to stay alert. League of Women Voters, got to stay alert.
Another question that came in was, is the county doing to promote rapid testing and making rapid home tests more available, especially to people who can't afford it. And I can tell you, I've had a number of rapid home tests lately. So
yeah,
it can be an expensive proposition. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, having just been through the testing process,
True.
that PCR test, boy, don't love it. We have a public health responsibility to provide things for people who are indigent. When people by economics leave the area of indigency and they are of a certain higher level, we've tried to make certain services available, but we can only do that which the state health department tasks us with. So in terms of vaccinations, I mentioned before, we're all in on pediatric vaccinations, and we've been involved in helping advance booster shots. On the testing side of it, testing kits are hard to come by, and the county has been, exempted out of that process. So we don't really have the ability to go and buy the tests ourselves and then make them affordable to somebody else. They're coming, from the federal and the state level government down. But I think what I ought to do to get a more full answer on this, do a little homework, and whoever the questioner is who asked that, they can drop me a note. They can drop me a note, Latimer George at Gmail. Okay. They can send me an email and I'll respond back to them with some greater detail.
There are some more written questions, but I think I would like at this point, because we don't have that much time left, to open it up to the audience. So if you have a question, please use the icon and raise your hand, and we'll leave it to Sean from LMC Media to start calling on people in the order in which they have raised their hands. Do we have any questions, Sean? Sean?
Yeah, first we have Marlene Colbert.
Hi, good morning, George. How are you?
Hey, Marlene, how are you?
Good. I'm still fine, thank you. I have two questions. One is about the environment. You know that many of the communities in Westchester are starting to ban gas-powered leaf blowers. It would be very helpful if there was a county rule to that effect, because little by little, every community has to fight it. As a county rule, it would be much more helpful. And then I just want to touch
Marlene,
on
before you go further,
Okay.
let me just tell you, we don't have the
Okay.
authority to impose that. We checked that out early
Oh,
on.
really?
If we could do a countywide
Oh, wow.
control over leaf blowers, and that's a power that belongs only to the local governments. What we can do is a better job on county-owned land, because we are responsible for the procedures by which we maintain our parks. And to the extent that we set other parameters for when they're being used. And I know Catherine Park is watching this. She, like me, we're sitting at home. Perhaps we can come up with a strategy to do better with the county, but we can't impose a law like that county.
But you could make all the county employees have to use no gas power, right? That you could
Yes,
do.
yeah, we have the ability to control what we do on our own, right?
Okay. And the other thing, I just want to make a comment, having been at the same event that you were, I just like to say, we'd like to go to events in the county, but without a mandate to wear a mask or show proof of vaccination, I'm not sure we're going to go back into those public things. So that's just my comment.
Well, Marlene, I'm struggling because you have a point of view that's shared by a lot of people. They don't feel comfortable going to a restaurant unless they know that everybody in there is vaccinated. They don't feel comfortable walking into a place with nobody with masks. The mask mandate has been made statewide, which is appropriate. However, there are people on the other side of the equation that are equally angry and resistant of wearing masks and vaccinations. And for me to enforce something like that, I have a lot of restaurant owners that have no interest in seeing that happen. And you've seen that in New York City, you have to really force people to do these things. And I have to, try to calculate what's the best strategy. the desire to make everybody feel comfortable when they go out to a restaurant is a good goal. The real goal of the vaccination thing is to encourage people to get vaccinated. That's the real goal. If you can't get into the restaurant, you say, oh, I better go get vaccinated. And to that extent, we've been successful using other strategies to grow vaccinations rather than having to say you have to go in and out. But I understand your point of view. And I guarantee you, if I put that vaccination mandate in tomorrow, then on some other Zoom, I'm going to have somebody come up and how dare you stop me? I'm an American,
Right.
eating. This
Yes, we all had to
society.
get vaccinated against, smallpox. We didn't have a choice.
But, I've had all those arguments with people.
I know. I know.
Here's the bottom line. There's a virus bigger than COVID in this country, and you know it. That virus is deadly and has infected 40% of this nation. I say no
Right.
more.
Right, absolutely. Thank you.
Are there more questions, Sean?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
God, I put them to sleep. I'm sorry.
No, there were a couple of additional questions that came up here. There was a question from Fran Snedeker who wanted to know how the performing arts fared in your county budget. And was there support for Arts Westchester?
Yes, there was significant support for Arts Westchester. I don't have the number in front of me. We put a significant amount of money in over last year. And Janet Langsam is among the best lobbyists that exist in the not-for-profit world. And the Board of Legislators, as well as the executive branch, continue to fund the arts. We see the value in the arts, not just because they ennoble the spirit, but because they also help engender economic activity. There are people who will go out to the theater locally, Emlyn and, other performances, and then go to dinner and then have other actions that spend money in the area. So we know the value of them. We funded them. In most cases, we were able to, during the COVID year, last 2 years, increase funding, even though there was the pandemic going on. That was pretty amazing. So this year we've had a good year. We were able to increase the funding again. And I just caution everybody that you don't know what the future looks like. So let's just be measured. And if a year comes when I can't do the same thing that I did the prior year, you got to remember the good that we did when we could, so that you don't say, oh my God, don't you understand the value of the arts? Yes, I do. Do you see what just happened with unemployment or with a economic? You have to look down. It's just like what I say with COVID numbers. When somebody gets mad at me, how can you do this? Look at the numbers. The numbers will tell you whether or not you should move in a direction or not. That's what I learned in my business career. Numbers will help define what you have to do.
I'm not sure that I see any others. If someone has submitted a question that I've missed, please raise your hand now so I don't.
How about the other question that Fran had? What training do the mental health specialist and law enforcement agents get so they can work efficiently as a team?
The training has been underway. I know Robbie Schlaff is on the line. I don't know, she's not a panelist. Robbie, if you want to put in the chat your information so that somebody can give you a call. She's the head of our Office for Women, and she has been directly involved in some of the training for police officers and to some extent, training for our 60 controlled dispatchers. But we have a training component. I can't tell you the specifics of it because I'm not the architect of it. Michael Orth, who is our Commissioner of Community Mental Health, is the person that's responsible for it. And there's a number of our departments, health and public safety, that are in and around it. But Fran, for practical purposes, we've gone to contract with established mental health entities who have the skill set to be able to execute. And it's going to be a work in progress. Let's be honest. When we launch out the first month, the first calls, how does it work? We're going to learn and we're going to adjust, and things are going to, we're going to be flexible, try to do the things we have to do. But I'm confident we're off to a good start. And Robbie has just put her email and stuff in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's always good to look and see who's attending. Elaine, I learned now from this year of Zooms.
Right. Any other questions?
I don't see any, so I'll ask our Elaine and Peggy if they have any questions. And if there is anyone else out in the audience, please, this is your chance. And I don't want to make George stay and talk longer than he needs to, because I think it's really hard when you have, upper respiratory ailments, whatever they come from. Do we have any questions from either of you
I
ladies?
want to thank the cup of coffee that was delivered to me by my wife. Good job.
Well, if there are no further questions, I think we will thank George for his presence here today under all the COVID circumstances that he has. And for everybody else for attending, I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season as well, and hope that we'll see you next month on January 11th, our next program, where we're going to be featuring the civic engagement group from the high school. And they will talk to us about the very specific ideas they have for some changes in the election procedures in Mamaroneck. That will be, I think, of interest to everyone. So happy holidays, everybody, and thank you for attending. And thank you, Nina and Peggy, and particularly George, for all that you've done today. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And
Thank
thank
you.
Bessie for me as well. I appreciate her help. Thanks very much. Everybody have a good holiday.
Right.
Oh,
and
wait, we got a message. Don't go away.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.